Hello everyone, TAC1421 here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG online gameplay commentary. Today I have a really cool little deck that I came up with, and that is a Tornadus Electrode deck. Now, the main attacker in this deck is going to be Tornadus, and you'll see him a lot in this one. There he is right there. And what Tornadus does, you're going to be using his second attack, which I forget the name of, but we'll probably see it eventually. And his second attack, for 3 colorless energy, it does 60 plus 60 more if you have the same amount of cards in your hand as your opponent. So I thought about this card, I looked at this card. This is a new card from the Furious Fist set, and it's a rare card, and I thought, you know, I could probably build a deck around this. I like the idea, I like the concept. It's kind of like a game inside of a game, trying to get the same amount of cards as your opponent and try to hit them for the most damage. Now, in decks that don't have EX Pokemon, this should kill with 120. Unless, you know, there's stage 2s that have like 140 or whatever. But for most non-EX decks, this deck will do really well. Now, for other decks that have EX cards, that's why I have the Silver Bangles on there. And the whole deck is based around trying to get the same amount of cards in your hand as your opponent. So 2 cards came to mind, and I'll show both cases. I'll show both decks, if you will. The first one that came to mind is Electrode. He has an ability, Magnetic Draw, which allows you to draw cards in your hand until you have 4 cards. So if you have less than 4 cards in your hand, you can Magnetic Draw, get 4 more cards. Now this synergizes really well with another card called Red Card. What Red Card does, and I have 4 red cards in my deck, couldn't draw one there, but what Red Card does is your opponent basically has to shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. So you can see how this goes, how this fits. If you do the math, you're trying to get the same amount of cards as your opponent. Electrode gets you to 4, Red Card gets them to 4, life is good. You can also put things in like Hue. I have 1 Hue in. Both you and your opponent either discard or draw cards until they have 5 in your hand. There's also a new card out there called Battle Reporter, which you draw cards until you have the same amount of cards as your opponent, which would come in handy right now. Don't have it right now. I also play Ends and then Junipers and all that stuff to try to get the same amount of cards as my opponent. So that's kind of the whole idea of the deck. And when it works, it runs really smoothly. The other card that came to mind is Delphox. Now, I'll have some Delphox gameplays out there eventually, but Delphox is a stage 2, so it's not as consistent, but it also adds an extra attacker. So this deck I run Lightning Energy just in case I ever need to, you know, attack with Electrode. It's colorless energy on Tornadus anyways, so might as well. But in the Delphox deck, Delphox actually has a pretty good attack, and its ability does the same as Electrode, except you draw 6 cards instead of 4. So it adds a little bit more versatility, and you get to draw more cards, get to go through your deck a little bit easier, and it's just a little bit easier to do your Tornadus attack for, you know, a grand total of like 120. And then you add the Bangle, and then you play it with Verbank and lasers, and it just runs really well. So now I have the full combo. I'm hoping to get a laser, because then I have knockout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. What am I saying? I'm gonna go ahead and Red Card my opponent down to 4 cards. Then I get to attach to a Tornadus. I get to Magnetic Draw a bunch of times, and I have to think: do I want to play the Red Card? I'm just gonna hang on to it. I do 150. I get knocked out from the poison, and now I'm just gonna send a Pokemon up to basically die, because Kyurem's attack, if he does have a DC, is gonna knock out any of my Pokemon, because he's gonna be doing 100 and I think 80 damage, something like that. So I'm gonna send out the Electrode. Maybe a misplay here, sending out the Electrode with the Float Stone. Probably should have sent out the Electrode without the Float Stone, but there was a chance that my opponent might not have the DC in hand. So now I'm just going to send out a Tornadus, and I could laser. I top deck the laser, which means if I did Red Card my opponent and then went ahead and used Electrode's ability, I would have got knocked out the previous turn, but there was no way of myself knowing that. So I'm going to attach the electric energy, the lightning energy, to my bench Tornadus, and the reason I'm doing that is because I already have knockout with my Tornadus's first attack, so there's not really a need to put 3 energy onto one Pokemon when I can spread the energy out. All I would need is either an electric energy or a DC to do Tornadus' third or second attack for 120 next turn. So I'm just going to hang on to it, play it safe. You see I get a electric energy from my prizes, so that is really nice. He's going to send out a Gourgeist. I can never say that Pokemon's name. My opponent's playing a pretty interesting deck, but I have played this deck against more consistent decks, more top-tier decks, and it runs pretty good, runs pretty smoothly. I thought this game did the best job of kind of explaining and going through what this deck's all about. I will have other gameplays of the Delphox version of this deck, which I like a lot as well. It's really interesting deck, so it's really cool. So right here, I'm trying to decide what I want to do. Do I want to laser? Do I want to, you know, just use the first attack? Do I want to fish for a switch? What are my options? So I'm going to go ahead and laser. That puts my opponent down to essentially 70 damage, which means I need to get some kind of switch or something. And I'm looking through my discard. I have the Dazzling Machine in hand, but I'm not really too worried about this thing doing a ton of damage to me. I am deciding whether I want... Really, I'm kind of going through my options here and trying to see what I want to do. I have 2 Electrodes on the bench, which means I can magnetic draw twice, which gives me a lot of options. I can end myself to 2 and putting my opponent at 4 cards. And if I do get the switch, then I get the knockout because I'll have the same amount of cards as my opponent because of magnetic draw. So I'm just going to put down the Tornadus and then magnetic draw. And I don't hit the switch, which is fine. I'm just going to retreat then and go ahead and Twister Throw. That's the name of the attack for the knockout. Getting myself my 5th prize of the game. And you can see there that battle reporter in hand will ensure me the win unless I get end. So that is really nice. Battle Reporter is definitely a really great card for this deck. What Battle Reporter does, I know it's a new card, you don't really see it too often. You draw the same amount of cards as your opponent has in their hand. So if they have 7, you drop to 7. If they have 12, you drop to 12. If you have less cards in your if you have more cards than your opponent, then you can't actually use the card. So right now I'm just gonna throw down everything I got and kind of just play test this out, see what I can do. I'm going to go ahead and not use the switch because I thought I had a float stone somewhere, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and Battle Reporter and then go ahead and knock out with Twister Throw, doing 120. So that is going to be the victory there. Really cool deck, really fun little idea that I had just pop into my head. I looked at the Tornadus card, thought it was really cool. Wanted to build a deck out of it. This is kind of the best that I got, but Delphox is also a very good card with Tornadus as well, and I'll show more gameplays of that, as well as more Magmortar Electivire games, and I have some Virizion Genesect games as well that I want to showcase. I just want to get this deck out really quickly because I really like it, just built it today, and it's really fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you everyone later. Peace.
You did it, Psyduck! Psyduck!